Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rachel Patton, Executive Director of Preserve Arkansas. Thank you for joining us for today's Women in Preservation webinar. Preserve Arkansas is the statewide nonprofit advocate for historic preservation, and our Women in Preservation series features Arkansas women who are working to save the state's historic places. Many thanks to our series sponsor, DMX Architecture of Fayetteville, for their generous support of this series. Many of you are already members of Preserve Arkansas, and we thank you for your support. If you are not already a member of Preserve Arkansas, we would invite you to formally join us for as little as $50 a year. Your memberships and donations help to sustain our organization and let us continue our mission of saving the state's historic places. Join us next month on June 14th at 3:30 to hear Pat Johnson for our next Women in Preservation talk. Pat Johnson is the founder of the Eddie Mae Heron Center Museum at Pocahontas. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Stacey Hurst was appointed Secretary of the Arkansas Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism by Governor Asa Hutchinson in July 2019. Prior to her appointment as Secretary, Stacey served as Director of the Department of Arkansas Heritage. As Secretary, she oversees the work of the divisions of Arkansas State Parks, Arkansas Heritage, Arkansas Tourism, Keep Arkansas Beautiful, and the Capital Zoning District Commission. She serves as the State Historic Preservation Officer, representing Arkansas to the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and is an ex officio voting member of the Arkansas Governor's Mansion Commission. She was appointed in April 2020 to the Governor's Economic Recovery Task Force in response to the impact of COVID-19, and she currently serves as co-chair of the Governor's American Rescue Plan Steering Committee. She served as a member of Governor Hutchinson's transition team following his election in November 2014, and as a member of his campaign finance committee during his successful re-election in 2018. Stacy is a lifelong Arkansan who grew up at Pine Bluff and received her Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville. Prior to her appointment to state government public service, she was involved for 20 years in general management and marketing for Tipton and Hurst, a family-owned business started in Little Rock in 1886. Before that, she was vice president of Arkansas Children's Hospital Foundation, where she was responsible for the statewide Children's Miracle Network telethon that resulted in over $2 million annually in private contributions. Her record of public service is extensive. From 2002 to 14, Stacy represented Ward 3 on the Little Rock Board of Directors and served as vice mayor from January of 2007 to December of 2008. As city director, she was a liaison to the Arts and Culture Commission, the Sister Cities Commission, and the City Beautiful Commission. Stacy is credited with leading the extensive planning effort that resulted in new private investment and revitalization of Little Rock's Midtown corridor. Prior to her election to the city board, Stacy co-chaired the Vision Little Rock Parks and Recreation Work Group, leading to the creation of the Parks and Recreation Commission, where she served for many years. She currently is serving a second term on the Little Rock Municipal Airport Commission, which manages, operates, and maintains the Bill and Hillary Clinton National Airport. Stacy believes in the importance of community involvement, having served on the boards of Youth Home, Carti, the Junior League of Little Rock, the Arkansas Field Office of the Nature Conservancy, First Tee of Arkansas, Boys and Girls Clubs, Little Rock Zoo, Alzheimer's Arkansas, the Cathedral School, and St. Vincent Infirmary Foundation. She and her husband, Howard, have 2 children, a son, Conley, and a daughter, Josie. And just last month, Stacy was honored by the University of Arkansas Department of Communication with its inaugural Outstanding Alumni Award. Please welcome Secretary Hurst.
Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome.
And I want to everyone to know Elaine Leanhart is also on this presentation, and she's going to be working the PowerPoint for me. And I just want to say how happy I am to be here and how much I support the important work of Preserve Arkansas, led by my friend Rachel. I am an ex officio non-voting member on that board by virtue of my position, but I have a sincere appreciation and love of the work of Preserve Arkansas. So I'm happy to be here. A little bit about me, in addition to that bio, just so you all understand what I bring to my job, is that I have a very personal love of history and culture. My mother was a history teacher. We grew up in our house talking about history. She taught middle school history for 40 years. My son is he got his undergraduate degree in history and a master's in history. And also we are a family who loves culture and nature. So, and that is shared by my children. In 2002, I was fortunate to be involved in the Junior League of Little Rock's effort to acquire and restore the Women's City Club in downtown Little Rock. And that's a project that I remain very proud of. I was there recently, and I can attest to the fact that the building is being used and is appreciated. And I can also note that they have applied for a grant to take care of some water damage that has happened to the building. And we all understand how challenging water issues can be with historic properties. Also, on a personal note, my husband and I, when we first married, we bought a very small, old Max Mayer designed house, famous architect from the Little Rock area. It was built in the early 1930s. We renovated that house and then moved, but then we returned about 14 years later to another Max Mayer house built in 1939. So we're about to do some work on that one. But again, we both, and I share a sincere love of historic preservation and historic properties. I did want to, Elaine, next slide. I wanted to tell you all a little bit about the work that we do at the Arkansas Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism, particularly in a couple of our divisions. Arkansas Heritage, as you all know, does a lot of work to support historic preservation across the state of Arkansas. On this slide, you'll see some of our superstars that do work every day to support historic preservation. First of all, in the Arkansas Heritage Department or division, we have the Arkansas Historic Preservation Agency. Tom Marr is our federal program manager who oversees the state and federal historic tax credit program. On the state level, we had a great effort in the last legislative session, working with Paul Porter, Patricia Glick, and with Rachel at Preserve Arkansas, and with a couple of legislators who were very supportive. We were able to increase the overall cap for the historic tax credit from $4 million to $8 million. I did ask Tom Marr before I joined this call where we stand on tax credits, and we have exhausted the full $8 million for fiscal year 22. And so far we have 8 projects approved for fiscal year 23 that are in the queue. So as you can tell, that is a very popular program in Arkansas. We also have within the historic preservation program, Main Street Arkansas. And I like to call the Main Street program the perfect combination of historic preservation, economic development, and community revitalization. We have 19 full-fledged Main Street programs across Arkansas and 21 downtown network programs. They do amazing work building economies across the state and working with volunteers and leadership and businesses to really protect the historic cores of communities. Greg Phillips is the lead on that program, and he is joined by a small but very passionate and dedicated staff. Also want to recognize within our historic preservation program the work of Ralph Wilcox. Ralph leads our National Historic Survey, National Historic Register. Interesting to know that Arkansas is a real leader in the country. If you look at the size, the population of our state and the number of listings that we have on the National Register, per capita, we are one of the most prolific states in the country. And that is due to the hard work of Ralph and his team that work across the state to research and survey historic properties and to get them listed on the National Register. As you all may know, the National Register status is honorary only. There are no restrictions on what a property owner can do with their property. They can alter it, they can even demolish it, but we do hope that it provides an incentive to maintain the property in the appropriate way. It also qualifies property owners for things like tax credits and grants. So we hope that that again will help protect historic properties. We do maintain a searchable database. It's on our website. You can find it at the Arkansas Historic Preservation Programs page. I always enjoy looking at it if I'm traveling to a new county and I want to see what's around there. It's a very interesting database that we maintain. We also manage grant programs for historic properties and other efforts to support historic properties. First of all, we have what we call Hprg, Historic Preservation Restoration Grants. There are a couple of options within Hprg, one that can help you get a property from the Arkansas Register to the National Register, and then one that once a property is on the National Register is owned by a nonprofit or a municipality that can help make improvements. We also have an option 3 that is for the restoration of cemeteries. And that one as well is for governmental entities and nonprofits. We have a very popular county courthouse grant program. In fact, we have the Natural and Cultural Resources Council Trust Fund meeting tomorrow. Rachel Patton sent us a nice letter that was supported by the county judges across the state, but it has been a very important tool to help protect the historic counties, county courthouses across the state of Arkansas. It's something we're very proud of, and we will look forward to doing that again this year. That is funded through the real estate transfer tax that funds the Arkansas Natural and Cultural Resources Council Trust Fund. We also do certified local government grants, and those are cities that have a local ordinance historic district, and there are funds available, federal funds available that have a pretty broad use. So that benefits those cities that establish that local ordinance historic district. Next slide, please. That is one of the beautiful the Cleveland County Courthouse that we will look forward to continuing to fund. I think we fund county courthouse restoration in about 65 of 75 counties. The only way that we won't support a courthouse is if it has been so altered that it's not eligible for the National Register, or for some other reason it's ineligible for the register. But we do about $1.5 million to $2 million a year to support our county courthouses. Next slide, please. So our department also makes available to the public a generous number of historic structures. The picture that you see here is of the amazing Jacob Wolf House, circa 1829. When I was first appointed by the governor to lead Arkansas Heritage, I was approached by some people up in Baxter County about this property that was then owned by Baxter County, but was basically boarded up and not available to the public. It was in pretty good shape, but it was not available to the public. So they needed an owner that could protect it and make it available and open to the public. It is right on the highway. If you have not been, I encourage you to go. It is right in Norfolk, Arkansas, where the White and the Norfolk rivers merge, right on the highway. It's really just a must-see. It is a 2-story dog trot structure. It was built by a gentleman named Jacob Wolf as the first territorial courthouse for the Arkansas Territory. Wolf was an elected representative for the territory to the General Assembly. And it is managed now for us as part of the Historic Preservation Program by a gentleman named Marlon Mowdy, who has been with the, I believe, the U.S. Forest Service, and he was also with state parks. So he has a deep appreciation for this important property. Improvements are being made to the property that are consistent, of course, with national standards of rehabilitation. So this is something we're very proud of. Next slide. Of course, we are the caretakers of the old State House. In my view, one of the most iconic historic properties in Arkansas. It is the original state capitol. Since 1833, when construction began, it has been a symbol of pride in Arkansas, and the legislature began working there in 1836. It is a designated war memorial and has served multiple purposes. When the legislature moved out, it became a facility that was used in many ways by the Arkansas State Police, by the medical school, and then eventually became a museum. And knowing what I know about development in Little Rock and the fact that this property sits with a beautiful view of the river, I am thankful that it is still standing and in the hands of state government. Because it tells a very compelling story of our state's history. It was here in this building that Arkansas was admitted to the Union. There was a fatal knife fight between 2 sitting legislators. This is where Arkansas joined to secede from the United States and join the Confederacy. There was pioneering medical research conducted here into hookworm and malaria. And as we know, it served as the front porch and site of 2 election night victories by a president of the United States. Next slide, please. We are also the caretakers of the various historic structures at Historic Arkansas Museum. Historic Arkansas tells the story of frontier Arkansas. And the buildings that are there are really remarkable that they are still standing. The Hinderleiter Grog Shop, circa 1827, is Little Rock's oldest standing building. It was built by Jesse Hinderleiter, served as a tavern, a restaurant, hotel, and it was a hub of activity in the early 19th century for travelers, trappers, even people who were involved in legislative activities, either making laws or as lobbyists. So it was a very important structure in the early 19th century. We also have the Brownlee House, circa 1848. It's a federal style brick house. It was built by James Brownlee's brother, Robert. And Robert was a stonesman by trade. He had come from Scotland to Little Rock to work on the new state capitol building, which was then the State House. So very interesting property there at Historic Arkansas Museum. Next slide, please. Also, I want to note our Arkansas State Parks and the vital role that the state parks serve in protecting important historic properties. Our state park system was established through legislation in 1927, and the first state park, as you all know, was Petty Jean. Several parks benefited from the Civilian Conservation Corps. Facilities were built in the early 30s, gorgeous signature native stone that we as Arkansans are familiar with. Next slide, please. The properties frequently are either individually listed or as part of a historic district, including cabins, building, bridges, various amenities at state parks. You can find them at Petit Jean State Park, Devil's Den, Mount Nebo, Lake Catherine State Park. Crowley's Ridge State Park has a beautiful collection of CCC cabins. Buffalo Point State Park was it was the state park before it became the National River, and there's a collection of cabins there that became federal government property in 1972. So the CCC projects included things like amphitheaters and bathhouses, pavilions, and et cetera, all of which benefited the development of our state park system and adds to the beauty and the attraction that people have to our wonderful state park system today. If you don't know, we entered into an MOU with the U.S. Forest Service to operate within the Ouachita National Forest, what's known as Lake Sylvia and Camp Ouachita. And at Camp Ouachita, there are historic cabins there that and a beautiful Great Hall that was built by the WPA. So again, those are wonderful amenities that are historic in nature and that our state park system protects. Next slide. Historic Washington State Park has an immense collection of historic properties. It is an effort between our division of state parks and the Pioneer Washington Foundation. As you all know, Washington served as the Confederate capital of Arkansas from 1863 to 1865 after Little Rock was taken by the Union Army. And so they emphasize at Historic Washington the cultural and architectural history from 1824 to 1889. There's a beautiful visitor center there in the restored historic 1874 Hempstead County Courthouse. And there's an amazing historic cemetery there, the Pioneer Cemetery, that last time I was there, I enjoyed walking around. It was began interments there in 1820, I believe. Next slide. We also have 3 archaeological state parks, one in Hampson, which is up in Wilson, Arkansas, and they present a collection from the Nodina site, a village that once thrived on the Mississippi River. We have Parkin, which is located on the St. Francis River. Parkin preserves a Mississippian period American Indian village in place from AD 1000 to 1550. And then, of course, Toltec Mounds State Park, which is, yes, a misnomer. It is the largest and most complex mound site in Arkansas, and it offers the rare opportunity to see archaeologists at work. The Arkansas Archaeological Survey has a location there, a post there, and you can actually see archaeologists actively excavating and studying evidence from this site. One point is we are examining now the name Toltec Mounds. We have had a listening session for the public held at the site, and we've had a discussion with archaeologists from the survey and the tribes were all invited and participated in that, just to get some feedback on a name change, a potential name change for our Toltec Mound State Park. So if that's something that you are interested in and would like to weigh in on, please shoot me an email at stacy.hurst@arkansas.gov. And I would love to have your input. And there is more at state parks. This is just a few items. They do a lot of history and culture and historic preservation. All of that is evident on the website. If you have an interest in looking at that and visiting state parks, I encourage you to take a look at the website. And I wanted to share with you all that in 2020, we completed a study of our historic preservation efforts to determine, how effective we were being in our efforts and what the economic impact was. When I first started at Heritage, I heard Donovan Ripma speak up in Fayetteville. I thought he was excellent. And when we put out a request for proposals to do this work, he was one of the respondents. I was tickled that we were able to hire him and his team at Place Economics to do this comprehensive report for us. Next slide, please. So the comprehensive report produced by Place Economics is called Building on the Past for a Prosperous Future: The Impacts of Historic Preservation in Arkansas. And the team studied 3 main programs of the Arkansas Historic Preservation Program, and they found very encouraging results. In fact, pretty astounding results. They studied the State Historic Rehabilitation Income Tax Credit, which I mentioned earlier. Over its history, at the completion of this report, they found that over the history of the tax credit, they had granted $21.5 million in state tax credits, attracting nearly $224 million in private investment. That is a very good return. It resulted in the rehabilitation of 342 buildings in 24 communities, created an average of 175 direct jobs and 133 indirect jobs each year for the last decade, generated $11.8 million in household income for Arkansas workers in the last 10 years. And the bottom line is that for every $1 in state tax credit issued, the private sector invested nearly $18. So that was a really good argument that we had in our pocket when we talked to legislators about the benefit of increasing the overall cap of the state historic tax credit. Next slide, please. I mentioned our grants. They studied those, and they were very complimentary of our robust grant programs that we have at the Arkansas Historic Preservation Program. Our grants have provided 2,400 grants to 170 cities in 74 of 75 counties, awarded nearly $55 million in total, and of course, helped keep our county courthouses in 64 counties in working order. And those are often the most beautiful building in the county. And the next slide. And I mentioned our Main Street program. They studied that, and they found that Main Street generated $377 million in buildings and public improvements, and 78% of the total investment has been made by the private sector. They established new businesses every year and developed a pattern of having more new businesses open than existing businesses closed. And after or having been involved in a small business within my married life, operating a business is tough, but Main Street has found a good formula that is resulting in more businesses staying open within their districts than closing. So that's a very good pattern. This full report is available if you want to look at the whole thing. It is available online, and you can just Google Arkansas Heritage and go to that website and find it on the Arkansas Historic Preservation page. And finally, last slide, or next to last slide. I am a big fan and believer in historic preservation, not just from an emotional or aesthetic point of view, but from an economic point of view. I feel like we can always do better in Arkansas. I have a quote on my wall that says, even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. It's by Will Rogers. So that is encouragement that even though we're doing a lot of good stuff, we can always do more and always do better. So I am curious, and I would like to hear from you all. Rachel, if it's okay, what can we do to encourage an ethos in Arkansas that embraces historic preservation? I'd be curious what you all see as barriers and what you would want our department to consider doing in order to encourage or grow this ethos of historic preservation. And that is my last slide. Well, there's one more, I think, a pretty picture of nature in Arkansas. And but I am certainly here to answer questions or just engage in conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Let's see here. We don't have any questions yet. So if you are watching and you want to pose a question to Secretary Hurst, please send away. You've got several people thanking you for your presentation: Jim Metzger and Bart Stafford and Mel Zabecki. Encouraging with starting with kids is what she's saying, to encourage an ethos of preservation, and inspiring parents to bring their kids out to enjoy the resources will help.
Thank you for that. We have within Keep Arkansas Beautiful, one of the things that Mark Camp did, the former director, was to develop a coloring book and Otto the Otter, and to really engage children on litter and litter prevention. And so I agree with that sentiment. And I know, Rachel, in historic preservation, we used to do a coloring book. And so I'm not sure that we do it anymore. And so I think we do need to do that. I agree. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, Patricia Blick, thank you for your presentation today. We are so lucky in Arkansas to have such a great state historic preservation office. We struggle in Little Rock with private derelict properties. Would like to work with the state on enabling legislation to establish a receivership program. Do you think it would be an option in such a property rights state?
I think it is not off the table, and certainly worthy of discussion. I think there are, it's a challenge in Little Rock, but I travel across the state and it's not confined to Little Rock. I think it certainly would be a good topic to discuss.
I agree. It's a problem everywhere. Marshall Ray, what is an example of an ethos we can build on?
One thing I've wondered is just how we encourage an appreciation for old structures. And both of my children went away to school, and they both landed in Virginia, which has of course, a lot of historic properties. But there seems to be a love of historic properties there, that they are not inclined to tear them down as easily, I would think. And some of the towns, it just seems to be a natural thing to restore historic properties, rather than the natural thing is to think it's too hard and difficult and to tear them down. So that's one thing I've thought of. How do we encourage a love of historic properties, a willingness to do the hard work to save a historic structure?
It's true. And that's, as you know, it's easier said than done.
It is.
Or people would just do it.
It is.
But there's
maybe it starts
things
with kids and really developing that and working with them to show them the beauty and the sense of place that historic properties provide.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's also about framing preservation in a way that it's relevant to more people. And that's tough, but we've got a good speaker coming in September that's going to talk about that.
Oh, good. Who's this? Well, you'll tell me later. Okay.
I will tell you now. Bonnie McDonald, and she's the director of Landmarks Illinois. in
Oh,
Chicago.
wonderful.
And she's just finished a fellowship called the Relevancy Project. And so she'll be speaking at our belated 40th anniversary dinner in September.
Wonderful. We need a big
Who
crowd.
is interested. Yes. Okay, let's see. From Kylie in Eureka Springs. One barrier I see in my community frequently is the limited financial resources for private property owners to improve and maintain their properties. Housing costs are high and already high for historic properties.
This is true. And we have the tax credits, but when you're talking about your private property, it is harder. Maybe we could look at what other programs other states are doing and glean, and Rachel, you may have this at your fingertips, but see if there's something we can glean from an effective program in another state. And I think, I don't think we'll ever solve that problem entirely. I mean, we've got some hugely historic commercial properties that income producing properties that we can't seem to get off the ground in terms of restoration. And again, those become cost prohibitive. We think the tax credits should level that playing field, but even those can't do enough to make it a viable project. So I don't know. It's a good discussion for us as lovers of historic preservation to have.
It's true. And I'll just, to everyone and to Kylie, I know Kylie's been working with us. We're going to have a dollars and cents of historic preservation in Eureka Springs in August, and hoping to really encourage private property owners in Eureka in particular, since the whole city pretty much is a historic district, where they could all qualify for the state historic tax credit as private property owners, as in owner occupied structures. They can qualify for that. And there just aren't very many tax credit projects happening in Eureka, nor have they historically, for whatever reason. But
so maybe that's just an education, do you think? I think don't know.
That's part of it. I think some people know, but that's part of it. I think the other part is just, the perception that there's a lot of red tape involved, maybe.
And there probably is, yes.
And then Kylie says in Colorado, there were 0% loans available for owners of designated properties.
We need to look into that.
It's an interesting idea. Okay, well, y'all keep typing questions. We've got plenty of time. And in the meantime, I have some questions. I wanted to ask, whenever you talked about Camp Ouachita, I'm interested to hear about that. So what is the plan, and will people be able to stay in the cabins there or rent the hall?
So yes, so Congressman French Hill brought this to my attention. I knew it was there, but honestly, I didn't know that it was closed for pretty much half of the year because the Forest Service would just shut it, and because they don't have the personnel or the resources to operate it all year. So we worked with them to create an arrangement where it is operated now by our state park system as a satellite of Pinnacle Mountain State Park. The state parks personnel have made some improvements, and the cabins are now open. They are what we call, they're not a full service cabin right now. You're supposed to bring your own linens. They do have a bathroom and a kitchen. So we think we're going to start offering a full service option. But right now you have to bring your own linens or your tent or your sleeping bag to set up in the cabin. But they are ready for rent. You can do that online. And then all the campsites are open, and we will open the property. It'll stay open year round. It is something that was so well received by the public. It was a real outpouring of support for that arrangement between us and the Forest Service. And Troy Highthicker is the forest supervisor for the Ouachita National Forest. And typically the Forest Service it takes a long time to work through things with them on the federal level, but we were able to do this in sort of record time with our team and his team. And now it is a model actually within the U.S. Forest Service for striking an agreement and moving forward. So we're really proud of it. And our state parks personnel from Pinnacle Mountain State Park are on the ground and operating.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear it. I didn't realize that everything was available for rent out there. So that's great. And as you know, Camp Ouachita was one of the few places that have ever received a Save America's Treasures grant in Arkansas. So that's great to see it in use.
And I'm so glad that happened. Rachel, I don't know if you were a part of that, but that was one of the reasons I felt like we could move forward, because the cabins were in such good shape and the big great hall was in very good shape. So what we needed to do was just a little sprucing up. It wasn't a huge investment to redo all the properties. They were in very good shape. So yes, bravo.
Okay, more questions from me. What's a place, this is just a fun question. What's a place in Arkansas, and that could be a historic site or a cultural attraction or a state park, that you think is a hidden gem that deserves more attention or that more people should know about it?
You know, I think it is, everybody knows about Petty Jean State Park and the CCC tradition there, and the Devil's Den CCC tradition is well known. I bet people are more unaware of Crowley's Ridge, and what they offer there is a similar experience as it relates to the cabins and the pavilion that was built again in that area with the beautiful native stone. And it's just lovely. It's a small park right next to Paragould, and it's in great shape. We went up and stayed in a cabin, and it's just, when I was there several months ago for the first time, and just, loved it. It's a really cool experience. So that's one that I would say people really should know about if they don't. Of course, there are historic cabins at Lake Catherine that are similarly beautiful. And well, Jacob Wolf House. If you haven't seen Jacob Wolf, you do need to see it. It's remarkable.
I agree. Okay, a question from Mary Jane Silva. Do you have any information on the reopening of Lake Weddington Recreation Area and Campground in Washington County, which I believe is closed until further notice?
I don't. And I don't even know if that is a local or is it owned by the Forest Service?
It's Forest Service.
Well, I do know that the Forest Service is slow to open their various amenities. In fact, we were just on a call with Lori Wood, who is the supervisor for the Ozark St. Francis, and she relayed that they are not yet back in the office, and they are hoping to be back in June. And we've got 4 agreements with them, like at Mount Magazine, at Mississippi River State Park, that we have that are needing to be updated and signed, and we're having trouble getting those done. So I think they are slow to fully reopen after COVID. Blanchard Springs in Stone County is part of the U.S. Forest Service in Ozark St. Francis, and we have that community up there has been pushing hard to get the caverns open because it is such a tourism draw in that area. And we were told that at first it was July, then it was June, and now actually it's Memorial Day. So hopefully things will start moving more quickly.
Well, it doesn't sound like you need more MOUs with the Forest Service, but if you did, Lake Weddington would be good. They've
Oh,
got
I would
historic
love, I need to
cabins.
go see it. I haven't, gosh, I went to college up there and I remember it vaguely, but I need to go back as an adult.
Yes, it's right down the road from my parents' house. That was my mom's question.
Nice.
Okay, Marshall Ray. In my experience, homeowners are not aware of the specifics of restoration. Misinformation is abundant in that it is complicated, outrageously demanding, and prohibitively expensive. Tax incentives are not publicized to the general public, and although the historic preservation advocates are aware, the general public is not.
I think Marshall is correct, and we have a responsibility, and I'm talking about my department, to spread that word, and we will do that in partnership with our colleagues at Preserve Arkansas, and of course any of the historic preservation entities. Patricia Blix, Pawpaw Quarter. I agree. We really need to double our efforts to get the word out. To the extent that we can streamline the tax incentives, I don't know that we can. It is just a complicated thing, but maybe we can work to make it less daunting. Certainly we need to think about that, because that if you have to hire somebody to help you navigate it on a small project, you're probably not going to do that. If it's a big project, you probably will, but we need to huddle. Rachel, would you make yourself a note? And we'll get with my team and see what we can do to make it easier and more understandable, easier to navigate.
Absolutely. I've got some ideas on that. Like, first thing, I don't know if they are on there now, but the part 1, 2, and 3 applications used to not be available online. So if people can't even see what they're about to get into, that's just one easy thing.
Yes.
That's one thing. Okay, Kylie and Eureka. Is there any upcoming historic preservation legislation or advocacy opportunity that we should be aware of?
We have talked before about a couple of things. One of them is to delay the increase in property tax on historic redos. Georgia, I believe, has a law that eases a property owner into their higher property tax rate after a historic redo. That's something that we've talked about, that there has been some interest in. Nothing firm, though, that we would pursue that. And there has been talk about raising the per project cap. So now that we have the overall cap raised, it might be wise for us to look at the per project cap. And as you all may know, we have a major rehabilitation tax credit that is for huge projects, but there's no funding attached to it. And so while we have interest in that, we don't have a way to fund it unless the governor contributes rainy day funds or the legislature finds a way to put money into it. So that might be a topic of discussion. Is there a way to actually fund it at a certain level? And that's all I know about. Rachel or Patricia, you all may know something I don't know.
I don't know anything else. Those are things I would have said. And one other thing, just for people on the call who may have thought of this or may not have thought of this, is that, it sounds like everything's pointing toward the fact that Arkansas will phase out its income tax in the coming years. And so if that happens, if and when that happens, we'll need to be ready with a plan of what to do for our state historic tax credit. There are other states around us who have successful tax credit programs with the franchise tax credit in Texas because they don't have the income tax. Tennessee's tried to get one on their insurance premium tax. I just don't know if that easily translates in Arkansas. I don't know enough about those taxes.
Yeah, that's a good point. That'll require some serious study.
Yes.
But thank you for mentioning that.
You're welcome. Let's see. Patricia, we'd love to continue to talk about receiverships and agree would also like to get into the delayed increase in property taxes.
Okay, good.
And
I think that would
Bart,
be helpful.
yes. And Bart Stafford, can the program be funded through the current budget surplus? I'm assuming he's talking about the major
Rehabilitation tax credit. Conceivably, yes. There is a lot of discussion about what to do with the surplus. One of the suggestions is to accelerate the income tax cuts. But that's one I know about. I have heard, though, that there is a lot of activity amongst legislators and the Department of Finance and Administration on, options. But certainly that would be something I think that the surplus could fund, and I can certainly see if that's a possibility.
Do we have any projects that are kind of targeted for that funding, or has anyone? Are you allowed to share that information?
Yes, well, it wouldn't be a surprise. They're the really big projects like the Arlington. I mean, that's the sort of project that was created for. I think there are two, but I can't remember the other one. Yeah, I can't, but it's that level of project. It's really the huge projects that can't, get the financing, especially right now, to get off the ground because they're so big.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Patricia's saying that maybe the VA hospital in Little Rock, the Boyle building.
Yeah, I think the VA is on that list. Yeah, mm-hmm. In Little Rock, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see.
Thanks, Patricia.
I know Marshall Ray is on here. I'm surprised he hasn't asked this question, but is there anything that Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism could do to increase or to help us offer programs and training for preservation trades?
Yes, we've had a conversation about this. Well, during my time here, we've had this conversation a couple of times, and it just has never gelled. But we are now having the conversation again, and to see if we can partner. Our thought is that we could partner with a company that's in the construction industry that has almost an apprenticeship program, working with either a community college or a high school or even a university to develop a program, and where, you would receive that training, maybe not as part of a degree, but maybe as a part of a larger construction management type degree or something where it would be a course of study as part of another training or degree. So we are having those conversations now. Along with everything else we're doing, we haven't come up with a specific plan yet, but it's been well received. And it's really just finding a home for it and someone to oversee it and push it through. But I'm hopeful. I think it would really be beneficial to historic preservation, and so does everybody that I talk to. People in the construction industry acknowledge that they need craftsmen with those skills. Of course, the historic property owners, when we were trying to restore the Jacob Wolf House, we had trouble finding a contractor that would do that work. So I think it's really just pulling all the pieces together and getting it off the ground. But we're working on it.
That's exciting. Kylie says Eureka Springs exploring preservation trade school in conjunction with economic development and affordable housing.
Well, we need to come up to Eureka. Mm-hmm. Is it in conjunction with a existing community college, or where would it reside?
We'll see if she responds. I'm not sure. Okay, you see.
Yeah, I think that's a great place for it, actually. I like that.
That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Carolyn Kent, are you aware of the Cross Hollows issues in Benton County?
No.
I am aware of that, Carolyn, and I will be, I think, testifying in court on behalf of the Cross Hollows Preservation Society in a couple weeks, if they call me. And that, for everyone else, this is a National Register listed road segment in Benton County, north of.
I am aware of it, yes. Okay.
And there's a rock quarry that is wanting to get permits to blast for limestone in property adjacent to Cross Hollows. And it's Trail of Tears, Civil War, Old Wire Road, all of these levels of significance. So hopefully we can stop that from happening.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't recall the name of it, but I am aware. We have been looped in. We wrote a letter seems like a year ago or more. This has been going on a while, right?
It's been going on for several years, yes. Okay, final call for questions. If anybody else has a question, type it in the Q&A or chat. And my final question, Stacy, if people want to stay abreast of what's going on with your department, is there something that they could subscribe to? Is there an email list, or should they follow on social media? What's your best recommendation?
Yes, I would say we have a very robust social media effort. And there is a place to sign up for email on website. And we would love that as well. Or you can just shoot a message to me and I can get you signed up for that. We would love it. And of course, anytime you have an idea or a question, please send me an email, stacy.hurst@arkansas.gov. I'm really good about returning my emails. Eventually, Rachel, I had a little trouble. I've had a crazy week. When I travel a lot, it's harder, but I usually respond within a day or two. So please, I'd love to hear any ideas that you have. And our department is poised, and our historic preservation group and our state parks and everyone is poised to be involved in great work. So let us hear from you. We'd love it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you again, Stacy, for an excellent presentation. And thank you to all of you for watching, and hope you'll join us next month to hear Pat Johnson and Pocahontas.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.